Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It's Friday, January 21st, 2022. I'm Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis. And you see that big smile on Crash's face. He's been very patient, and it's finally time to talk about the divisional round, which means that his Packers, who've gotten that bye week, are going to be ready to go. But they'll be in game 2 of our coverage here today, Josh. You have to wait for that early Saturday game first.
Yeah, I've gotten used to waiting, so why not?
Why not a few more hours, right? A few more minutes. So what we're going to do today here is break down both Saturday games, get you ready for the 2-game slate. Then we'll have our separate podcast for the Sunday 2-game slate. And then we'll help our members get ready for all the different contests this weekend on all 3 sites, including Yahoo and the Showdown slates. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We need to break these down team by team and really look at these matchups so people will be ready for each of the slates. So, Josh, let's start with Cincinnati and Tennessee. And for this 2-game slate, it's interesting. Both totals right around 47 and a half. Home teams favored here. Tennessee by 3.5. Your Packers now favored by 5.5. A little bit of money on the 49ers as that number opened at 6. But let's start with Cincinnati here on the road, coming off a decent win over the Raiders. Give everybody some confidence there. Shout out to all of our Bengals fans for that first playoff victory since before texting began. So it's been quite a while, but exciting for everybody there and a fun group to watch with Burrow and company. And also right there, I like Burrow here as my quarterback on this slate, 6,600. So he's cheaper than Rodgers and, pretty good matchup here against Tennessee. They're 25th in yardage allowed against the pass, and they're really strong against the run. Second in yardage allowed there. So I'm more about Burrow to, one or two of his pass catchers on the 2-game slate. We know that Chase was the man against Las Vegas, getting the big targets, big yardage. T. Higgins, surprisingly, really didn't do much, wasn't targeted much. But Tyler Boyd is one guy I want to jump on here early because he's a value play. I think he's important to get one of those here on this slate. And guys in the slot against Tennessee have been very strong all year. We saw in week 18, Danny Amendola, of all people, 7 for 113 and 2 touchdowns. And guys who are bigger names have done well against Tennessee in that spot this year. But remember, Beasley towards the beginning of the season had 7 for 88 and a score. And so I think this is a way that Burrow will attack them with Boyd. They're going to put as much focus on Chase as they can with Fulton and Jenkins on the outside. I still think Chase or Higgins could get it done at their price, but I like Burrow to Boyd, and then maybe if it fits to get Chase or Higgins into the lineup as well. What are your thoughts on this Cincinnati pass attack?
Yeah, I was really impressed with Joe Burrow. His first playoff game last week, he just was so calm. You would have never known that was his first playoff game if you would have just watched it, from the casual observer standpoint. And he just, he was so composed and under, just poised under pressure situations at the end of the game. Just really impressed. And I do, in general, like Cincinnati in this game. And I definitely like both Boyd and Higgins, as I think that they're going to draw the lower ownership. And the targets have kind of been going all over the place for the Bengals. So I could definitely see it shifting back to them this week.
Yeah, we've seen some back and forth throughout the season with Chase and Higgins getting big target days. But lately, the thing that has jumped out at me is the consistency of Boyd. The last 5 weeks, he's gotten either 5 or 6 targets each week, and he's had a touchdown in 4 straight games. So a little bit under the radar. Meanwhile, Higgins, the last 4 games, his target numbers have been 4, 5, 13, and 2. So he had that monster game against Baltimore, which I think can throw people off a little bit. And so he has that tremendous ceiling that's much higher than Boyd. But lately, Boyd's been the better value per target. And again, I really like this matchup for Boyd. So that's why I'm on him, if I had to pick between him and Higgins this week. And then with Uzama, he had a nice showing against the Raiders, but it's a tough matchup here. Tennessee top 5 against tight ends, so I'll probably pass there. Mixon really got the volume, major snap advantage, touch advantage. He had 21 touches against the Raiders. Meanwhile, P. Ryan and Evans had 1 carry each, and that was it. They weren't targeted in the passing game, so I would not go with one of those backup running backs.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go with Mixon either because of that matchup. He would be GPP only for me. But I do like this Cincinnati passing attack.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else for you on that side? Or are you ready to break down the Titans for us?
No, just those 2 receivers for me was the main threat for me for Cincinnati's passing game.
Okay. All right. Well, talk to us about Tennessee and their running back situation.
Yeah, so they're going to be getting Derrick Henry back. It looks like they officially announced that he's going to be activated today. And so that's a huge lift for them, obviously. He didn't really see much of a discount, especially on FanDuel. He's $9,000. He is the most expensive running back. He's $7,500 on DraftKings, so he's a little bit more affordable over there. But Cincinnati has been, below average against running backs this year. They've allowed the 13th most fantasy points to the position. But Derrick Henry hasn't played in a game since the end of October, so we're not really sure exactly what kind of workload he's going to get. But I do think that, Tennessee is going to try and keep the Bengals and that high-powered offense with Joe Burrow and all those receivers off the field. So they're going to try to control the clock. And Henry will obviously be the best way for them to do that if they're successful. So he was averaging 26 fantasy points per game through 8 games. Obviously one of the top players in DFS. So Henry's my top option for Tennessee by far.
Yeah, we know that Tennessee loves to run the ball, and he is tremendous at that. I feel like there's some mixed signals for me, though, on Henry. I'm kind of going back and forth because, first of all, I don't trust that. I never trusted that he wouldn't be activated. I think they're just, trying to delay the inevitable and try to add a little bit of intrigue there. But I don't think there's any question.
Right.
He'll be ready to go. We've seen some videos where he looked pretty good in practice. So I think he'll be in good shape to give it a good run. No pun intended. But you mentioned the matchup, above average. Our friends at PFF give Tennessee a 73% run blocking advantage, which is very significant. Second best on this slate. But for the season, he's only averaged 4.3 yards per carry. Which is actually the same as Foreman. Hilliard's actually been more efficient in limited touches, but it's because of that volume that he was averaging all those fantasy points in the first 8 weeks that you were referencing. We know he's not heavily involved in the passing game by any means.
Yeah.
So I'm a little hesitant just because of not knowing if he's actually ready to get 25 carries or more. If he, and so then the other piece of it on the flip side is that last week Jacobs carried it 6.4 yards per carry. So, Cincinnati could be had on the ground a little bit here of late. They're missing one of their defensive line stoppers as well. So I kind of go back and forth. But are you settling on paying that high price tag?
I haven't settled on it myself yet. But, I'm just saying if I was to look at Tennessee, he would be the top option for me. There's a lot of inconsistency in their passing game. And that's one of the reasons why.
Okay. Well, let's turn to that passing game.
Yeah, so I'm looking at A.J. Brown, 7,600 on FanDuel, 6,200 on DraftKings. If Henry struggles or is limited in his workload, the Titans will probably look to A.J. Brown in the passing game. He's been their best wide receiver, obviously. Before Henry went down, Brown actually had 2 back-to-back 30-plus DraftKings points games, which is pretty interesting to me. He had 8 catches for 133 and 1 touchdown on 9 targets for 30.3 DraftKings points against Kansas City. And he had 10 catches for 155 yards and a touchdown on 11 targets for 34.5 DraftKings points. So just because Henry's coming back, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to go away from A.J. Brown. And I think that's going to draw his ownership down quite a bit with Henry coming back. So I do like A.J. Brown in this matchup.
I do too. I like him a lot. In fact, I like him a little bit better than Henry, given his price. I think I'll have more lineups with Brown than Henry. Watching, the Cincinnati secondary, I wasn't too impressed with Eli Apple last week. I think that's who A.J. Brown will see most. And we saw Zay Jones get a touchdown on Apple. A.J. Brown's got the size and strength advantage. He's certainly Tannehill's favorite target, most trusted, most consistent. Although, like you say, it has been a very inconsistent passing attack because lots of times they don't throw it very much. But how about the end of the regular season? The last game against Houston, Tannehill threw for 287 yards and 4 scores. And he really, I think, has gotten some confidence going for that passing attack to know that they can do it if Henry struggles. And he really spread it around. The touchdowns went to A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Westbrook-Akine, and Ferkser. So how about any of those other guys in the passing attack? Any of them jump out at you?
Yeah, Ferkser for me, 3,100 on DraftKings, so he's very inexpensive. He has scored a touchdown in the last 2 games to end the season. Cincinnati's allowed the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends this year. We saw last week that Waller was, able to get open and be effective against them. So it's a favorable matchup. And I feel like, Ferkser's kind of that low-owned GPP play that could probably separate us from the rest of the field in the tournament potentially if he gets in the end zone.
Yeah, I like Ferkser here as well. Even as a punt play in cash because of that price, like you said, touchdowns in 2 straight after kind of a disappointing regular season where he really just didn't quite hit what we thought he would hit. Swaim stepped up and Pruitt, but Pruitt is out now. So Ferkser really has stepped up. So I think you could go there. How about Julio? That touchdown last week was the first one of the season for him.
I know.
I mean, I know he's been injured, but man, they could really use a lift from him. If they do have to go to the air.
Yeah.
All right. Any final notes here on Tennessee?
That's all I got.
Okay, excellent. Well, before we get to game 2, thank you all for tuning in. Hit that thumbs up if you don't mind. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got you covered for the NFL playoffs. We've got your NBA podcast coming out 7 days a week in front of the paywall. Coach and I have got the golf podcast as well, and baseball is right around the corner, hopefully. So join us on YouTube for all of these podcasts. Any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter at DFS Coach Talk. If you want to join us for the lineups this weekend, go to our website, dfscoachtalk.com, sign up there, get the 4 sports special, and join us through the NBA playoffs for all of our sports. That's a terrific option. All right, so let's get to game 2, San Fran and Green Bay rematch. By the way, this is the game we just did, Cincinnati, Tennessee, is the only game this weekend where the teams have not played each other already this season. So this is a rematch, and your Packers won back in week 3, 30-28. This one is in Green Bay. It's going to be cold, single-digit temperatures, maybe even below 0 with the wind chill. Probably not the ideal scenario for the 49ers and Jimmy G with that banged-up thumb. He's been dealing with a shoulder issue as well. So he's not 100%. They are the 5.5-point underdogs. And I do favor Green Bay overall in this game. But I do have a lot of faith in Shanahan as well to come up with a good game plan. We know they've been really run heavy. If you look at the Dallas game last week, they only threw it 25 times. In the last 6 games that Elijah Mitchell has played, he's gotten at least 21 carries in each game.
Yeah.
So we know they want to hand it off to him a bunch. Pro Football Focus gives the 49ers an 85% run blocking advantage. So that sounds good. But, the Packers are solid across the board defensively. You can talk about the guys are going to get back to be even stronger this week. But the one thing I want to talk about is we know that San Fran wants to run the ball, and they've gotten really creative here recently getting the ball into Deebo Samuel's hands as a running back. But it's funny if you look back at week 3, In that game, Debo carried it twice, and he had 10 targets in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at San Fran last week against Dallas, Debo ran it 10 times and had 3 targets in the passing game. So it was completely flip-flopped. He was much more of a running back against Dallas than a receiver.
Right.
And back in the beginning of the season, they were not using Debo in this way, where he's touching the ball more as a runner than receiver.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that big coming out party for Debo against the Rams. So, that's kind of a game changer for what happened with the 49ers in that matchup, not being able to beat the Packers. So I think that, that'll be a wrinkle that would be a big challenge for Green Bay. Why don't we start right there for your thoughts on the Packers defense? What will they add this week in terms of personnel? And what do you think about how they might be able to slow down San Fran as they really try to run the ball?
Yeah, I think that with Zadarius Smith and Whitney Merciless coming back, they do help with the pass rush, obviously, but they also help stopping the run because Zadarius Smith is very versatile, and they can line him up at defensive tackle right next to Kenny Clark. So they could have Preston Smith, Zadarius, Rashawn Gary, and Kenny Clark all on the line, and those guys can they can set that edge really well. And then Devondre Campbell, he was just named to the All-Pro team. He can really slow down the run too. So I think with Zadarius back and Whitney Merciless and those guys, they're going to really key in on that running game. And when Green Bay has done that this year, they've been really good against the run.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to be a key battle. A lot of fun to watch in the cold. I do think Shanahan will continue to get creative with the running game, short passes. And in that first matchup, I want to note that Kyle Juszczyk and Ayuk both had 4 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. And Juszczyk was kind of more of that Swiss Army knife in that game than Debo, because Kyle had 5 carries and 4 catches. And again, Debo was primarily a receiver at that point. So Juszczyk, if you look at the game logs, he would be a great value if he got that same role. I think it's a little bit unlikely, somebody to look for in a GPP, but I do think Debo will get more of those touches. I just don't know if I can get to Debo at 7,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah.
So that's one that I'm kind of grappling with, along with Derrick Henry in the first game. You could go with one of these value receivers for San Fran, though. Ayuk, Jennings. Jennings, remember, had 2 touchdowns against the Rams at the end of the regular season. The problem here, again, they throw it low volume and they really spread it around, because in that Dallas game, you also got targets for Benjamin and Sherfield. But let me wrap up the San Fran side here with probably my favorite play. It's Kittle, who hasn't been doing much lately. There's a little concern here with Jimmy G, of course, and his health, but it's a above average matchup. We've seen big games against Green Bay for tight ends. Andrews had the biggest.
Yeah.
But even Gerald Everett had a game, 8 for 63, and Kittle himself went 7 for 92 when they played before. So I like Kittle to bounce back here a little bit, be more involved in the game plan. 5,300 on DraftKings, a lot more affordable than Debo. So I think I'm going to have Kittle here in a bunch of my lineups.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. With Jair Alexander coming back, I think that they won't rely as much on Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage at the safety position, rely as much on them in stopping the pass as, they'll have them come up to stop the run, I think. And so that's going to open up opportunities between that and Campbell and Chris Barnes, the linebackers, focusing on the run, that I think Kittle is going to have some opportunities that he hasn't, for whatever reason, had lately.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, it was good to have your insight on the Green Bay defense for throughout this season here, because we know the Green Bay has been involved in a lot of these primetime games we've broken down. So awesome stuff, and I'm glad that you now get to break them down on the offensive side of the ball here finally. At Lambeau, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Aaron Rodgers is 8,400 on FanDuel. He's 7,100 on DraftKings. In week 3, he completed 23 out of 33 for 261, 2 touchdowns. No interceptions for 19 DraftKings points. Wasn't a ceiling game, that we've seen from him, but a solid game. San Francisco's been about average against quarterbacks this year, allowing the 16th most fantasy points. But, Rodgers is 0-3 against San Francisco in the playoffs, and I think that he's going to come out on fire, looking to try and make a statement in this game. And I think that he and Davante Adams are going to hook up quite a bit, especially early. And, Pro Football Focus has him projected as their 5th highest scoring quarterback this weekend. I think he'll be in the top 3, if not higher than that. And I think that the other top quarterbacks on this slate are going to have some matchups that are pretty tough. And they could see, I could see them struggling a little bit more than Rodgers at home against the Niners secondary, which has had its issues at times this year.
Yeah, they really have. Pretty strong defense overall, again, on paper. The Niners, that is, top 10 against the run in the pass, but you can beat them on the outside. And how about Devontae in that first matchup? 18 targets.
Yeah.
Like you said, it wasn't a ceiling game for Rodgers, but out of his 33 attempts, 18 went to Devontae, caught 12, had a monster game. Is he locked in for you?
Yeah, absolutely. He's 8,700 on FanDuel. He's 8,500 on DraftKings. But, the 49ers were about average. They've allowed the 17th most fantasy points to wide receivers. But Devontae has had a ton of success against them the last several times he's faced them. And, week 3, like you said, he had 12 catches for 132 and a touchdown on 18 targets for 34.2 DraftKings points. But if you look at his 4 games, he's averaged 32 DraftKings points against San Francisco. So it's not really that much different than what he's done his whole career against them.
Yeah, and then the other thing is watching the tape of San Fran and Dallas. I was watching the San Francisco corners, Mosley and Thomas, and they were really playing soft, letting the guys get the underneath passes like Cooper. And if Cooper is going to get that room and have that much of an open start to his routes, I see Adams doing much better than even Cooper. Maybe they'll change it and get up on him a little bit, but he's got the size advantage on those guys as well. So I just don't have faith that San Fran will be able to slow down Devontae. He's a touchdown monster. But how about the rest of these pass catchers? Because we've got some moving parts here with health.
Yeah, MVS has been dealing with a back injury for basically the last month. So he's going to be listed as doubtful. I don't think he'll play. Green Bay has one of the most conservative medical staffs out there. So I do not expect him to play. But Allen Lazard is 6,000 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DraftKings. With Cobb, he's been out, and with MVS dealing with his back injury, Lazard has really stepped up in a big way. He scored 5 touchdowns in their last 5 games. And, if San Francisco does decide to double up on Adams, it could really open up some opportunities for Lazard. He had 5 receptions for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns for 24.5 DraftKings points in the first half against Detroit. And then in the week before that, he had 6 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown for 19.2 DraftKings points against Minnesota. So he's really established himself as the wide receiver 2. And with Cobb being out for the last 6 weeks, I'm not sure how much he's going to be involved yet. So I do look for Lazard to be a strong play as he has been the last several weeks.
Yeah, he's really stepped it up, no doubt. All right, how about the running backs and the tight ends?
Yeah, I actually like both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in this game. Prefer Dillon more on FanDuel and Jones more in DraftKings because Jones is more of a receiving threat. Dillon, when they get in the goal line situations, that's where he really thrives. I could see them kind of powering behind that offensive line and getting into the end zone, even if Jones is the one that's driving them down the field. So I like both those guys. Jones is 7,500 on FanDuel, 6,800 on DraftKings, and then Dillon 6,100 on FanDuel and 5,100 on DraftKings.
Now, how much faith do you have in Aaron Jones and his health? Because he sat out the finale against Detroit, right? And even in that game before that against Minnesota, Dillon had 14 carries. He only had 8. Do you think he's healthy and ready to go?
Yeah, Jones looked good to me the last time I saw him, which was in that Minnesota game. He didn't have a lot of opportunities, but he talked about in his press conference, I guess it was Wednesday or maybe Tuesday, about having fresh legs, and he was ready to get out there again. So I think that Jones will do just fine.
Okay. Any interest in the tight ends there?
In a GPP, I could see that being in play with DeGuara, but for the most part, not really. That touchdown he had against Detroit, that was his second one of the year, but he had that big pass play, and that's the first time he's done that all year. So I don't expect him to have that kind of a big play in this game.
Yeah, to me, it would be GPP only. I'd rather on DraftKings pay the extra $100 for Ferkser. But I will mention that if you only look at the rankings here, San Francisco is top 10 against tight ends, but they haven't faced Andrews, Kelsey, or Waller. And we saw in the last week of the regular season, Higbee had 6 catches, 55 yards, 2 touchdowns. So again, I think it's worth a consideration in GPPs to look at DeGuara, because he does seem to have gotten more chemistry here as the season has gone on with Rodgers, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. And like I said, that's why he would be that, big GPP type play for me.
Excellent. All right. Well, I know you'll be fired up here for this event, and we'll have all of our lineups locked in at that point, so you can sit back and relax and watch it. Again, for the lineups,
it won't be relaxing. There's no relaxing.
For the lineups, we'll be giving out full lineups on FanDuel and Yahoo for the 2-game slates, cash lineups, GPP lineups. We'll have showdown slates on FanDuel, full lineups, DraftKings, the core. We'll have a 2-game core on DraftKings for cash and GPP. So a lot of slates. Jump in with us. Enjoy this. This is a really important weekend. It's a great time of year for NFL DFS because we've studied these teams all season long, and now we get the biggest matchups where guys are healthy and we have a good feel for how they're going to approach it. So dfscoachtalk.com. Join us as a member. We'd love to have you. And again, any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter at dfscoachtalk. Join us for the Sunday show. That'll be posting here later Friday afternoon. And great work, Crash. Good luck to your Packers. And on behalf of the rest of the DFS Coach Talk team, I'm Andrew Hanson. We'll see you next time as we look to crush it in DFS.